When Edward III officially laid claim to the French throne, few in Europe believed England stood a real chance. At the time, France was considered the wealthiest, most powerful, and most populous kingdom, boasting the finest flower of chivalry. However, in practice, the English military machine proved to be more flexible, efficient, and lethal than anyone anticipated. Today, we will break down exactly how the English army managed to dominate the battlefield for decades. We will explore their unique tactics, cutting-edge weaponry, and the unusual social structure of the era. The first and most crucial factor that set England apart was the gradual move away from the classic feudal system of conscription. Instead of relying solely on vassals, English kings began to actively implement a system of military contracts known as indentures. A captain would sign a formal agreement with the crown, promising to provide a specific number of trained soldiers for a fixed monetary payment. This meant the army became effectively semi-professional and far more disciplined. Soldiers of different social classes fought side by side, creating a sense of combat unity and trust that was unique for the time. Furthermore, England enforced a strict law requiring all men to practice archery on Sundays. Thus, for decades, the state prepared a massive mobilization reserve of common yeomen. By the start of the war, England possessed a resource no other country could match. The primary and most recognizable symbol of English victories was the famous longbow. Crafted from a single piece of yew, such a bow could reach nearly 2 meters in length, taller than the average man of that time. The draw weight ranged from 45 to 70 kilograms, approximately 100 to 150 pounds, requiring immense physical strength and years of training from the archer. A skilled English archer could aim and fire up to 10-12 arrows per minute. Imagine a black cloud of thousands of arrows raining down on the enemy every few seconds. There were various types of arrowheads: broadheads for unarmored targets, and narrow, faceted bodkin points for piercing chainmail. While the bow couldn't always penetrate high-quality steel breastplates, it caused absolute panic among the cavalry. It is vital to remember that the archer was not just a ranged shooter, but a hardy soldier capable of engaging in fierce hand-to-hand combat at a moment's notice. Contrary to popular myths, the English army was far from being composed of archers alone. The core of its striking power consisted of men-at-arms, recruited from the nobility and wealthy commoners. A revolutionary feature of the English was that their knights often preferred to fight on foot. This made their battle formation incredibly resilient against any French cavalry charges. At the beginning of the war, knights used chainmail reinforced with plates, but by the 15th century, they transitioned to full, sophisticated plate armor. Their primary melee weapons were poleaxes, formidable hybrids of an axe, hammer, and long spike. Short swords were also highly popular. An English man-at-arms was a versatile and dangerous combatant, equally effective in defense and offense. The entirety of English tactics was built upon the clever use of infantry strengths and terrain features. Typically, the army would take up a favorable position on high ground, protecting its flanks with woods, marshes, or steep slopes. Dismounted knights were placed in the center, while archers were positioned on the flanks in characteristic wedges. In front of their positions, archers would drive long, sharpened stakes into the ground, angled toward the enemy. These stakes became a deadly trap for the French heavy cavalry, robbing them of their maneuverability. Time and again, French chivalry made the same fatal mistake, attacking the English head-on under a ceaseless hail of arrows. When the enemy, exhausted by the barrage and having lost their horses, finally reached the line, they were met with fresh, disciplined men-at-arms. It was this iron discipline that allowed the English to hold their positions even when outnumbered many times over. English strategy in this war was not limited to large-scale, famous battles. The primary method of conducting a war of attrition was the chevauchée, deep and brutal raiding forays into enemy territory. The goal of these raids was the total devastation of the French economy and a demonstration of the French king's powerlessness. English units moved with maximum speed, burning villages, seizing supplies, and driving off livestock. This strategy required excellent supply organization from the English crown across the turbulent English Channel. A massive fleet of transport ships regularly moved thousands of horses, tons of arrows, armor, and food. The port of Calais, captured after a long siege in 1347, served as England's strategic bridgehead on the continent for decades. The Battle of Crécy in 1346 was the first real shock for all of knightly Europe. English archers literally decimated the elite of the French nobility and experienced Genoese crossbowmen. 10 years later, at Poitiers in 1356, the Black Prince not only crushed the enemy army, but also captured the French King John II himself. This event pushed France to the brink of total catastrophe, plunging the country into a vortex of chaos and uprisings. Decades later, Henry V repeated this incredible success at the famous Battle of Agincourt in 1415. On that fateful day, deep mud, cramped conditions, and an endless downpour of English arrows spelled the end for thousands of France's finest knights. However, toward the middle of the 15th century, the face of warfare began to change rapidly and irrevocably. Although the English were among the first to use primitive cannons during sieges, their opponents seized the initiative. It was the French who first managed to implement artillery on the battlefield en masse and effectively. At the Battle of Formigny, mobile French cannon simply blasted the English archers from a safe distance. The last major battle of this long war, Castillon, was a true triumph for French artillery. English tactics, which had relied on bows and static defensive positions for years, became hopelessly outdated in the face of gunpowder. In addition to military failures, internal strife known as the Wars of the Roses broke out within England. The resources needed to maintain vast French territories were finally exhausted. The English Army of the Hundred Years' War left a deep mark on world military history. It demonstrated in practice the importance of professionalism, rigid discipline, and the combined use of different branches of service. And that is all for today. See you next time.